After the Seth Jarvis deal is now finally completed, what is next for the Carolina Hurricanes as we are officially 39 days away from opening night?
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Monday Labor Day edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I am the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. Also do a weekly column with the Chicago Wolves called Wolves Weekly, which will be starting here in less than a few weeks. I'm also the co-host of the Surge Cast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fun show for you guys on a Monday Labor Day edition as we get to see what's next for the Carolina Hurricanes, as now we get to officially have some hockey this month in the month of September, as the calendar has now officially flipped over with the Prospect Showcase coming up, and also training camp is also starting later this month as well. Get a look at the roster and see where we're kind of at as of right now with the Carolina Hurricanes under $100,000 left in their cap space. And also going to finish up the show with Frederik Andersen and the Danish national team have qualified for the 2026 Olympics on the back of Frederik Andersen playing some really great hockey for them, and looking at seeing who's in the 2026 men's division when it's going to be in Italy in a couple of years. But before we jump into all of that, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NHL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FANDUEL.com to get started. So, like I said, we are now in the what's next for the Carolina Hurricanes. The big thing that was taken up for the last, I would say, few weeks. I know the Martinici still took a little time to get to, but then pretty much after that, it was just waiting to see when the Seth Jarvis deal was going to get done. I know a lot of people were getting antsy, and we were wondering when that was going to get done. But thankfully, on the last day of August, on Saturday, that the deal was officially done for an 8-year deal that will take him through the 2031-32 season. And I hope everyone enjoyed that Saturday special episode. Big thank you to Walt Ruff for jumping on with me on Saturday to do that super special episode talking about Seth Jarvis and what that means for him and the Carolina Hurricanes. So if you haven't checked that episode out, make sure to do that after you watch and listen to this episode, because it was a lot of fun talking to Walt. But like I said, now it's a what's next for the Carolina Hurricanes. I will talk about the roster, but that'll come in segment 2. Just to see where we're kind of at in terms of the depth chart, and talking about cap space as well, and what could be something the Hurricanes might look at when it comes to the training camp and all of that. But right now, the big thing for the Carolina Hurricanes in terms of what's next is that they have their Prospect Showcase that will be at the Ford Ice Center in Nashville, Tennessee. I know a few episodes ago, we talked about the roster and who's going to be going there. Obviously, we have Felix Unger-Storm, Bradley Nadeau, Jackson Blake, a lot of the big names, Dominic Fensor, Anthony Honka, and all those guys are going there. Even Skylar Brendamore in a PTO is going to be there as well. And looking at those games, it's going to be the 13th through the 16th, which is a Friday through a Monday here in a few weeks. And for Carolina Hurricanes' first game will be Friday the 13th at 6 p.m. and they'll be taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Then they play Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. against the Florida Panthers. Sunday, September 15th, will be a practice day for all of the teams. And then Monday, September 16th, it'll be a 2 p.m. game. It'll be the last game of the actual showcase because Tampa, Florida play at 11 a.m. that morning. But the Hurricanes will take on the host Nashville Predators. And that's basically it in terms of when it comes to the Prospect Showcase. And if you listen to the episode with Walt Ruff on Saturday, we know that there's not a lot of time in between the Prospect Showcase and training camp. Is that will, from what he said, that will start on the 17th or 18th back in Raleigh at the PNC Arena, and of course the Invisalign Arena and stuff like that too. So not that far off. We are talking about 14, 15 days away from the fact that we're going to get some training camp action. And then after that, not too long after, we will have the preseason schedule, which has been out since the middle of, back end of June, with the Carolina Hurricanes take on the Tampa Bay Lightning in Tampa on Tuesday, September 24th. And then Friday, September 27th, they will be home against the Florida Panthers before going back to Florida that next day on the 28th. And then we finally flip over till October, where it's the second against the Nashville Predators at home, followed on October 2nd. Then it's October 4th against the Tampa Bay Lightning that Friday. And then they go back to Nashville one more time on Saturday, October 5th for a 5 p.m. game to wrap up the preseason. And then not too long after that, we have our home opener on October 11th. Also is the first game of the season. In general, luckily it's at PNC Arena once again, and that's against the Tampa Bay Lightning for the first part of it back-to-back, which we'll see them go to Tampa the next day. But that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of the fact that we're just waiting for hockey to be here. Luckily, we are in a month where hockey is officially going to begin. Like I said, the Prospect Showcase is not that far away. A lot of guys to keep an eye on. I'm really excited to see what the new guys of Nadeau, Blake, Undersorum, can do. Scott Morrow on the defense. Gleb Cherkasov is going to be there as well. So it's going to be fun to see how those guys do in Nashville at the showcase here in a couple weeks. And then not too long after that, we got training camp, and there'll be a lot of possible position battles in terms of where the roster's kind of shaping up right now. And maybe do we see some of the young guys maybe pull a Seth Jarvis and kind of surprise Rod Brind'Amour and the staff and seeing if there's one of them that's going to make a shot to break the main roster out of camp and maybe make that move of, okay, are these guys good enough to make the roster, especially with the top 6 spot possibly opening up, or maybe somewhere down the right side? Because as we know, Jesper Foss won't be on the roster this season due to having surgery in his neck earlier this month. So that's another roster spot that's potentially open for someone like maybe an Understorm or a Jackson Blake or Bradley Nadeau to make it. And maybe we see possibly 2 rookies make this roster, or is it just the one? Or when we go into the segment 2 and talk about the roster, what it looks at right now, according to Puckpedia, and just where it's at in terms of the cap space, do the Hurricanes kind of stay put and maybe have the young guys get some time in Chicago before maybe we see a November, December call-up, or even in January? So there's a lot of question marks right now in terms of what the roster could look like by October 11th. Of course, that's over, a month and almost 2 weeks away. So, as of, September 2nd, we are a good bit away from October 11th in terms of what the roster could look like. But, yeah, as of right now, what's next for the Hurricanes? That remains to be seen in terms of what the roster looks like, if there even is a roster move. Other than that, it's just kind of waiting for, seeing what the Young Bucks can do. Is there going to be someone who could surprise a lot of people? I know when I talked to Nick from Canes Prospects, we were both kind of really high on possibly Bradley Nadeau being that guy to watch for when it comes to camp, and the fact that, as the roster's kind of set right now, maybe he might surprise a lot of people and pull a Seth Jarvis and break out of camp and maybe make the roster. I know talking to Corey Laviolette and even Walt Ruffin, don't overlook guys like Jackson Blake and Felix Understorm. They could possibly do something as well. Defense-wise, I'm not really sure if Scott Morrow can crack the top, looking at the defensive pairings. You got Slavin Burns, Orlov Walker, then Gostisbehere Chatfield. That's a pretty hard group to crack on. So I don't really see the Hurricanes maybe bringing a young guy in just to have him playing as a 7th D-man. I could see that being like a Riley Stillman, Ty Smith type position in terms of what the roster looks like. But overall, it's just a wait and see period right now with the Prospect Showcase and training camp coming up and seeing if anyone's going to, shock anyone else and possibly break into the roster. So unless the Hurricanes can find a way to get cap compliant with maybe adding someone else to the roster in terms of free agents. I know when I talked to Walt and even talked to Jacob Billington from the Hockey Writers, there's not really a lot of guys left in terms of free agents. We got maybe James Van Riemsdyk. I know Kyler Yamamoto is available, depending on how much that deal could work for. So it all really depends. It could be a thing where the Hurricanes, maybe they might go and get someone in free agency, or maybe we could look at maybe a couple PTOs in terms of the NHL level. Because I know, like I said, Skylar Brind'Amour is a PTO, but that could be more of a putting him into the system to fill some more roster spots. Because as of right now, the Hurricanes have 45 of 50 contracts taken up, and usually some teams get to about 47 to 49. So maybe, if Brind'Amour could do really well in training camp and even the preseason, maybe there's an AHL deal for Skylar, and he's going to be with the Chicago Wolves next year. So who really knows? In terms of the NHL roster, I guess it really depends on what you're looking at in terms of the, is there something there? So I guess we'll have to see and figure that out. But you know what? Stick right here, because we will talk about what the NHL roster looks at as of right now after the Seth Jarvis deal. So make sure you stick around here as we'll talk about that here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. You've heard us talking about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, now we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com and download that and be part of America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On AHL podcast. Locked On AHL provides you with a national perspective on all things AHL each and every day, with the national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And welcome back to a segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said, at the end of segment 1, we're kind of going to go and talk about what the roster looks like as of right now after the Seth Jarvis 8-year extension. And according to Puckpedia, of course, you can kind of play around with how you want to do it in terms of their Puck GM. But looking at the roster right now for the Carolina Hurricanes, even with Jesper Fast possibly going to go in the LTIR. That's not officially official yet, but we're going to know that's going to happen eventually. The Hurricanes, as of right now, sit at $79,913 in cap space, and that's with, earlier you had to move some contracts down to kind of fit them in compliance because they were over $1 million. But let's say you go into camp and go into the, the day where you have to be compliant. The Hurricanes have to be within $0 or, with $1. But as of right now, they are at $79,913, and that's with, you look at the lines of Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, and Seth Jarvis. Of course, Seth Jarvis, his AAV is $7.5 million. And then you look at, now from looking at what the roster could look like, you got Jordan Martinook, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Martin Necas on your second line, William Carrier, Jordan Stahl, and Jack Roslovic being on your third line. And then Eric Robinson, Jack Drury, and Brendan Lemieux. Of course, there might be some finagling around where you might have William Carey on the fourth line, and maybe and Jordan Martinook on the third line. Maybe put Jack Roslovic on the second line, and maybe move up Eric Robinson and Brendan Lemieux. So we're not really sure what these lines could possibly look like, but this is what kind of makes the most sense if the Hurricanes don't really make any other moves, and if maybe they're not really ready to have a rookie move up yet into the main roster. So we're just looking at a possibility of what happens if a Bradley Nadeau or Jackson Blake or Felix Understrom aren't quite ready yet. And this is kind of like the forward core that they go with. Defense, you get Jacob Slavin and Brent Burns, Dmitry Orlov and Sean Walker, and then Shane Gostisbehere and Jalen Chatfield. And your goaltenders are Peter Kochetkov and Frederik Andersen. Like I said, Jesper Fast would be as the LTIR guy. And then in the press box, as your extras, you're probably looking at Tyson Jost and Riley Stillman. So that's kind of the roster that the Puckpedia guys kind of have. And this is where on Puck GM where I kind of what might make the most sense for the Carolina Hurricanes and what I've seen on Daily Faceoff as well. So that's kind of what your roster's looking like. And of course, you got Bradley Nadeau and Unger Storm and Jackson Blake and Noah Gunler and Gleb Triksov and all them down there in the minors with Scott Morrow, Ronan Seeley, Ty Smith, Anthony Honka, and then, got the goaltenders, Spencer Martin, Janusz Peretz, and all of them. So, like I said, as of right now, with Fost on LTIR, with Jost and Stillman in your press box as your extra forward, extra defenseman, you are looking at a roster that does have 22 of 23 guys on the roster, $79,900 left in cap space, and you have 45 of 50 contracts officially signed for the Hurricanes. Now, of course, we know with there could be some possible PTOs taken care of. Like I said, if Skylar Brennemore does well, maybe there's a deal in place where he goes to Chicago on a two-way deal to be some center depth for the Hurricanes. Because right now, what it looks like, it's Ryan Suzuki for the most part, and also Justin Robidas is kind of like your centers. Bradley Nadeau could possibly play center as well. They most likely want to keep him on the wing, but Josiah Slavin, I could see him being a center. So there could be a scenario where it's if they want to add a guy like Brendan Moore, then there's your kind of like your third or fourth center, depending on how you want to look at it that way. But so usually teams want to stay between 47 to 49 contracts to leave an open slot just in case there's a waiver guy that they want to claim. They don't have to worry about moving some contracts around. So right now they're at 45. I could see them eventually being up between 47 and 49. In terms of what the main roster looks like I said, you're looking at a tad under $80,000 left in terms of cap space. Even with trying to finagle some contracts around it, I don't think you're going to be seeing the Hurricanes bringing in a full 23-man roster coming into opening night or even to starting the season just because of where they're at. But, things could possibly change. The Hurricanes are really good at being cap compliant when it comes to being at $1 and still being within having the full roster that they need. But like I said, you could bring in some UFAs, maybe possibly one. It just depends on what that looks like and, who could be moving around, who could be dropped and stuff like that. But if you're looking at what the roster is right now, maybe if you drop someone like Eric Robinson down, then you're kind of saving some money there, or because if you move any of the $775,000 contracts to Lemieux, Jost, or Stillman, you're not really giving yourself that much extra room if you want to bring someone else up, because you have to move one of them down to maybe make enough room to where maybe it's not a Tyson Jost that could be up on the main roster. Maybe if you're looking at a Bradley Nadeau, even then, you're looking at $854,000 of someone coming up. Possible roster guys that could make the jump up if they don't bring in Tyson Jost. You may be looking at Ryan Suzuki at $775 or a Felix Unger Storm at $831,000, because unfortunately Jackson Blake and Bradley Nadeau are both over $900,000. Noah Gunler, who's pretty much a dark horse, but maybe someone who could do something as well, he's at $862,000. So let's say you don't have Tyson Jost staying up there. Your best bets of someone coming up to maybe taking a roster spot is maybe Suzuki at the same contract price, or maybe a Justin Robidas $825,000, or a possible Felix Unger Storm at $831,000. So that's kind of the guys you're kind of looking at. So I would say your best bets are a Suzuki, Robidas, or Unger Storm if you don't have Tyson Jost in there, and if you want to add one of the other guys to possibly make the roster coming into next season, if you want to have a younger guy come in and not have maybe a Robinson and Lemieux in the starting lineup. But like I said, it's an interesting situation for the Hurricanes to be in right now, with them being slightly under $80,000 and not really bringing in someone from free agency that's going to take up 10 times that, where you're looking at $775,000, $800,000. Do you have a bunch of guys in your system right now that you could possibly do that with to bring up if you move down a Jost or a Stillman or possibly a Robinson? Even then, Robinson could give you more options in terms of your younger guys. Then you could look at a Jackson, Blake, Bradley, Nadeau. If you're looking at moving a guy with a $950,000 cap hit instead of a $775, then that does open up a lot more of your prospects. If you move a guy with a $950 cap instead of a $775. So there is some moves the Hurricanes could make in terms of sending guys up and down to possibly add a high-end prospect with a little bit more money on his contract than a guy with $775,000. So that's in terms of what I could think might happen with the Hurricanes in terms of making some roster moves, is just if guys do really good in camp in the preseason, and maybe it's okay, this young guy like a Blake or a Ungerstorm or a Nadeau does really well. Okay, we do have some contracts that we could move down, like I said, a Jost or a Robinson or a Stillman, to where they could open up a spot for one of those guys. So it really just depends on how, the prospect showcase goes, how they do in training camp, how the preseason moves on as well. And then what Rod Brandamore and Jeff Daniels and, Tim Gleason, and then, looking at the front office with Tulsky and York and talking to Tom Dunn and the owner too. There's a lot of voices that are going to be, thinking about what's best for the Hurricanes in terms of opening night. Of course, that's not going to be the roster the whole season. It's just who's going to be there game one against Tampa Bay on October 11th. So, like I said, it's a lot of question marks right now in terms of the roster, but that's kind of what we're looking at right now is 80,000, like less than 80,000 in the cap, 22 guys on the roster right now, 45 total contracts in the system out of 50. Like I said, usually you're about to 47 or 49. So in terms of free agents, I'm not really sure if there's anything there. It could be a lot of roster moves. Like I said, like I talked with Walt Ruff on Saturday, it could be a lot of more internal moves than anything else. So with that being said, we'll see how that goes, but there's a lot more to talk about as we get to discuss, or, I get to, kind of highlight Frederik Andersen, what he did for the Olympic qualifiers with Denmark as he helped the Danes get into the 2026 Olympics. So stick around as we'll talk about that here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to a segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, as I said at the end of segment 2, Frederik Andersen was helping that team Denmark in their Olympic qualifiers over the weekend. It was 3 games, and he actually got all 3 wins for Denmark, and the Danes did make the qualifier for the 2026 Olympics that will be in Italy. And very, very exciting. He actually shot 60 of 64 shots. So over a span of 3 games, Freddie Andersen only let in 4 goals. So, I mean, right now he's already looking at midseason form. Of course, we saw with his stats last year, 13 wins, a 1.8 goals against average, and a really high 9s, 9.3, 9.4 save percentage. So already looking really good for Frederik Andersen. Congrats to him and Denmark for making the 2026 Olympics. Also, other teams that got in, Slovakia got in, and also Latvia as well. So those were the 3 teams that kind of filled out the rest of the 2026 men's division of making it for the 26th Olympics, and who's going to be playing over there. So as of right now, and this is from Stephen Ellis of S. Ellis Hockey, he said this is the 2026 Winter Olympic men's hockey teams who's going to be participating. You got, of course, Canada, Finland, USA, Germany. Then you got Sweden, Switzerland, Czechia, Slovakia, Latvia, Denmark, Italy, and then with an asterisk, he does have Russia. So now Russia is still waiting on possible participation. Of course, we all know that they've been banned from the IAHF because of the conflict between them and the Ukraine, but we're not going to get into the politics side of things. But as of right now, Ellis has Russia in there as a tentative possible participant, and that just depends on the outcome of their hearing in 2025 if they are allowed to participate in the 26 Olympics. Now, if they're not able to participate in the Olympics, then it'll be France who will be taking over that spot. So as of right now, we tentatively know what our men's teams are, but that just comes down to what the hearing is for Team Russia. Like I said, if Russia is reinstated and allowed to participate in the Olympics again in international competitions, then Russia will be part of that original group from Steve Ellis's tweet. But if they're not eligible and they are denied once again, and then you're going to have France being part of the 26 Olympics with, like I said, the mainstays of Canada, Finland, USA, Germany, and all of them. So it'll be very, very exciting to see how that comes out. But I'm also just excited for the fact that you get Frederik Andersen and the Danes are going to be part of that. It's really cool to see you got basically a good part of the Scandinavian countries kind of being in there. I know Norway is not officially into the 26 Olympics right now in terms of hockey, but like I said, you do got, of course, the mainstays of Finland and Sweden, but now you get Denmark, who's also right there. And that's very, very exciting for the fact that you get, Frederik Andersen and those guys being part of the participants in that. And then you got the Czech Republic and you got Slovakia. So that's going to be a nice little rivalry with those guys. And then, of course, Latvia, who's, been pretty decent all in terms of getting really good goalies and being a country that has produced some really good players for the most part. So it's fun to get them in there. And then, of course, Italy is in because of the Olympic rule of, you're hosting, you're going to get in. Basically the same thing with the World Cup and stuff like that. So that's why Italy is kind of listed there in terms of the Olympic teams and stuff like that. Then, of course, Sweden, you got Switzerland in there. That's no surprising at all because Switzerland's a very good country who's they're somewhat underrated, but they're always a team that's always going to be there. And then, of course, as always, the mainstays of USA and Canada, not really surprising there. And, of course, Germany. And that's fun to see Germany in there, too, because you look at a country who's been on the rise in terms of, stars of Moritz Seider, Tim Stützle, even former players like Marco Sturm and all of them. So you're getting a lot. It's fun to see countries like Germany, Latvia, all of them are kind of on the rise in terms of when it comes to international hockey. Because a lot of Germany was like a lot of those teams are mainly known for soccer and stuff like that, and having some decent hockey teams. But if you look at the Russian League of the Dell, it's really fun to watch, especially if you're able to get a chance to do that. And a lot of big names have been coming out of Germany as of recently too. Of course, Leon Draisaitl and all of them. So it's gonna be fun. When you're going to the Olympics in 26, you're gonna see Tim Stützle, Moritz Seider, and maybe Lucas Reichel from the Chicago Blackhawks. When you got Leon Draisaitl playing for Germany against a lot of the guys like Sebastian Aho in Finland, and maybe possibly Teuvo Teravainen, and then looking at Sweden with Elias Pettersson and all of them too, and of course, obviously, the United States and Jacob Slavin and all of them in Canada. So it's going to be fun to see what the rosters look like for the 2026 Olympics. I know on Puck GM you can figure out your international rosters. So that'd be kind of fun to see what Hurricanes could make the Olympic team roster. So that's maybe an episode here down the road in the off season before we kind of turn the page onto the regular season and training camps and preseason and stuff like that, because we are going to be back to 5 days a week starting here on September 16th. So we're only about 2 weeks away from being back to 5 episodes a week. So maybe the international rosters for the Hurricanes guys, maybe it could be a fun little episode before you get into full-blown training camp coverage and preseason and all that stuff like that. But like I said, once again, congratulations to Frederik Andersen and Denmark for making the 2026 Olympics. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and hopefully Freddie will be there in the net for the Danes when it comes to that being hosted in Italy within a couple of years. But that will wrap up a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. If you want to follow me, you can follow me at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. If you click the link to my bio, you can find all of my articles at the Hockey Writers. And you can also check out where to watch and listen to my other podcast, The Surgecast, on podcasts and on YouTube. And then for this show, you can click the link to where to listen on all podcast platforms. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review. And if you do, I might read it on the podcast. On the YouTube side of things, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up button. Let me know that you like the show as well, because that helps us get promoted more and being shown more on the YouTube side of things. Make sure to share with other Caniacs, because they'll make them become everydayers just like you, because we are over 940 subscribers. We are on the road to 1,000. And if we get to 1,000, I might do something special for you guys. But in the comments section, let me know what prospects you're looking forward to, with the upcoming prospect showcase. And do you think that there could be a possible roster move in terms of maybe a free agent or an internal move with a prospect maybe making a splash or kind of surprising everyone like they did, like Seth Jarvis did. So let me know in the comments what you think about that. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Monday episode of the show. Hope everyone enjoys their Labor Day. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.